Hello everyone, my name is Ashton Gleckman and welcome to today's interview. Today I am immensely grateful to be joined by one of my favorite composers who's been an inspiration ever since I started writing music when I was 13. This is Mychael Danna. He's composed the scores for films you know like The Life of Pi, Onward, Girl Interrupted, Capote, and so many more. And he's really invented a sound and really helped to shape the film scoring industry as it currently sits today. And so I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Really happy to be here.
The first thing I want to ask is we're, of course, in 2020. It's changed the way that everybody's worked. And I want to ask, how are you? How is everything in Los Angeles? How is your work? How has it changed the way that you work?
Yeah, it's definitely impacted our business, and as we all know, is going to accelerate all the changes that have kind of been working their way into the system over the last few years. Yeah, for me personally, I'm here alone. My assistant, my wonderful assistant Nick Scalba, um, we decided in March when everything closed down, like he moved out. And, I think everyone's discovering the same thing kind of at the same time that you don't really need office spaces and you don't necessarily need like to be working on site. So things are working fine. And, I have a film that was supposed to be in theaters right now. Um, the Tom McCarthy film called Stillwater with Matt Damon, and that got postponed. The release is postponed to an unknown date, likely next spring. But yeah, so that's a little frustrating because we were originally going to finish and everything in August and mix it and then bring it out. So I mean, the good thing is that I've been able to really spend some time with it and tweak it and get it, I think, to be a really nice score. We recorded the strings at Abbey Road remotely, kind of a smaller group, but it was the right amount for the film because they max out at 40 people in the big room at Abbey Road now because of the COVID situation. So, and then I recorded a lot of players remotely, a couple of them live down the street at this amazing old studio called Boulevard. And so that's been going on, and I'm starting up another film now. But yeah, it's been slow, but I've really appreciated it. I've been able to clean up my storage room. So like now I found all these old boxes full of old analog tapes, and now everything is all like super organized in here. Like how nice this
Wow, it's
is.
all
All
on
my
shelves and everything.
films,
Very nice.
all, all on shelves, all the
So what's
boxes, and
in
then
all those boxes? Is it all instruments or something?
this is all scores. So
Okay.
if you look at, like, for instance, The Good Dinosaur, there'll be like our drives
Mhm.
with the files on, like the computer drives, but also actually scores. So if you pull it out, you pull out, this is Storks, and
Hmm.
we pull the box out and look inside. Yeah, there's a bunch of,
I'm curious, if you create like custom sounds for a project, do you put that on a drive and store it with all that stuff, or does it stay on your machine and you come back to it
yeah.
later?
It depends on what it is, but yeah, generally stuff gets very specific, and
What is it like looking at all of those boxes, which is essentially like looking into your life? I mean, it's looking into your past, the past, however long you've been doing this.
yeah,
What's it like to reflect on your career?
it's been that's kind of what I've been doing over the last few months while I've had more downtime than usual. And I found all these old analog tapes of old mixes. So I actually bought just like a couple of weeks ago, I bought this beautiful Revox analog 2 track, so I can not only play some of those old things, but also mess around with tape echo and all the things that I used to do that I kind of got out of the habit of because it just, you know, it takes longer, and I've moved a couple of times and a lot of that analog stuff kind of didn't get hooked back up. So now next week I have a guy coming in, he's putting in this beautiful patch bay, and all my analog stuff, all my tape recorders and old echoes and all kinds of old stuff is all going to be connected, which I'm very excited about. And it's kind of, so I'm actually a little grateful for this pause that I've been able to do things like that. I have a new, you know, web page, and I'm on Facebook, which I have never been on before. I
Nice,
literally just
awesome.
went on. these these are the things you do in a pandemic when I've been so busy for the last 15 years, just nonstop going from one project to another, and they overlap, and I'm just, I have kids, and I'm just trying to like tread water and just do the tasks that I need to do at hand. But so it's been really nice to catch up a little bit here.
Now you're from Canada, and you have
Yes.
a lot of great company in regards to composers that are from Canada, interestingly enough, like Howard Shore, etc. But I'm curious, what was it like growing up in Canada? And I remember hearing a story about when you were in your teens, all of a sudden there was a big spike and there was a lot of people, coming and you were getting inspired by a lot of musicians that you were meeting. Can you talk a bit about growing up in Canada and what that was like for you?
Yeah, I think, I don't think I would be a film score composer if I hadn't grown up there, because there was this freedom. And I think Howard Shore, who is just slightly older than me and just slightly kind of at the beginning of that wave of guys that were doing film scoring up there. He also, if you listen to his early work, especially, it's really experimental and kind of free. And that's how it was up there. There wasn't kind of this Hollywood model that you felt like you had to follow. Yeah, there was this really we were writing scores, both Howard and I and a bunch of other people were writing scores primarily at first, certainly for Canadian films, which were um, definitely going out of their way to not be American and to be something different and more like a European model, more auteur driven, more experimental. And so musically, we had free reign to kind of do whatever we wanted, and there just wasn't that expectation and pressure of trying to make a model Hollywood score. That's something that you know I learned how to do later, but for like my very first score, I used African drums. I used a string section, I used African drums, I used what else is in there, some ethnic flute and things like that. So right from the beginning I was kind of doing that stuff because I was doing that in theater, which is where I met my first filmmaker, Adam Magoyan. And so we just carried on that spirit of experimental um, music and just doing kind of whatever we wanted to. And our budgets were small, so we couldn't have that big Hollywood orchestra. So we had to do other things. But yeah, what was in the air at the time, especially, was this big wave in the 70s of immigration that was kind of government mandated to build this multicultural country out of the kind of boring old it was all British Isles, a few other kind of Northern Europeans and some Southern Europe. Like, you were exotic if you were Italian, if you were Catholic, wow, that was like, wow, I know a Catholic person. That's really interesting. It
Right.
was very black and white. It was kind of a boring country. And the government made this decision in the late 60s, the early 70s. Trudeau, Pierre Trudeau, the father of our current prime minister, decide, the to kind of have this sense of multiculturalism and encourage people to come from different countries, but also encourage them to continue with their culture, with their language, with their art and their food, thank God, and all these things. So Canada just suddenly became overnight this really rich place. And I think the attitude was so positive about it, and it still is. I mean, it really works pretty well. Just that it's kind of exciting and fun and creatively, it's this just real amazing creative pool of players that you have around. And so you meet somebody, and then yeah, I play ney, like I play Persian ney, or I play oud, or I play, and wow, okay, like let's get together, let's, or So all these things kind of worked their way into what I was doing in theater music and in film music.
For every composer, their first project is a bit different. And I know, for example, Danny Elfman came from the whole Oingo Boingo thing, and then Tim Burton sort of threw Pee-wee's Big Adventure at him. But for you, what was that process for you like when suddenly you're working with visual media? First of all, what was the transition like from going into picture, and how did you find it initially?
Well, when I was growing up, oddly enough, and I know a lot of composers, if not all of them, say, "Well, I became a composer because of Star Wars or one of those kind of big Hollywood scores." Those never really caught my attention while I was growing up. I was more interested in music, film. If a score caught my ear, it was usually one that was a bit different. Planet of the Apes, or even like Ben Hur, because it had that kind of, the modality, this sort of Middle Eastern modality. It's like, whoa, what's that? That melody's beautiful. Why is that different? So those were the things that caught my ear. I never had any intention of becoming a film score composer because there wasn't anything that was really, to me, interesting. Um, so I ended up working in theater when I was in college, and I studied composition in at the University of Toronto. Started working with theater groups, started writing for them. So that was my first kind of collaboration with dramatic arts. It's a great way, because you work so closely with a cast, you really get inside. Unlike a film where they slide the film under the door, and obviously you work with a director, but working in theater, you really got a sense of all the things that go together to make a production, and the collaborative spirit, which I absolutely loved. And that was something that really I found like so inspiring. And some people are built for it, some aren't. Some people are like, here's my music and this is what it is. And some people like me actually enjoy, feedback and someone saying, I think we need to move it over here or do this. And I've generally found that, especially working with smart people, the scores get better that way. And also, you end up doing music that you never would have originally come to do. So the first time I did a film, it was with somebody that I came from the theater world with. So it didn't feel like a huge step. And that score, if I listen to it now, it's kind of funny because it sounds like a score I would still do today. The combination of East and West, of non-European and European styles and instruments. It's something I did literally right from my first score. Well, that's not true. My very first score, I got fired off of, which was,
Well,
which was.
there's that saying where like you're not a true film composer until you've been fired. So you just sort of got that over with at the beginning, which is great.
Uh, oh, I wish that was the only time I got fired, but that was certainly,
Happens to the best of us.
and I do tell students, people starting out, like the really important thing is to be patient and be consistent and persistent. And yeah, there's so many opportunities to give up, and there's so many reasons um, to feel like you failed. But yeah, you have to believe in yourself and keep going and learn and apply it to what your future is.
One of my questions has to do with, I mean, looking back at your filmography, you can see very clearly it's incredibly varied. You've gone in and out of so many different genres, and I feel like you've intentionally set out to do a multitude of different kinds of projects. But I'm curious, there is that one aspect of your music combining East and West that is very signature about your sound. And coming from a young Michael, going back 20, 30, however many years, where did you get the confidence to start going out into that unknown and finding instruments and messing with them and combining them in different ways? Because it's different. I mean, it's something that not a lot of people do. So what gave you the confidence to go into that territory and do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And by the way, back then it was extremely uncommon. There were only a few people doing it, and because the communication system was not the way it is now, you couldn't just Google, West African drumming. It took some work, and I studied it in college, studied ethnomusicology, was very much exposed to all these different groups. In our music department, we had a gamelan group, we had an early music group, we had African drumming. So there was all this, like it was easily kind of available to my ears as well as the people to play them. But also, I think, I don't know if it's so much that I had courage. I had a lot of ignorance. I didn't know any better. I didn't know. I wasn't a John Williams fan at that time, so it wasn't like, oh, well, this is what film music needs to be. I didn't know what film music was supposed to be, so I just did what I felt like doing. And you know, like I said, if I grew up here in Los Angeles, I don't think I would be a film composer because there's so much. Even just sitting here, you can feel the pressure around you. You can feel the presence of the history of the, this is how things are done. Certainly at that time. Now, of course, things have fragmented a lot more and it's a lot more open. But back then, there was definitely a way to do Hollywood film scores. I had no idea about those. I wasn't even in the same country. I didn't care. So it wasn't so much courage as ignorance and just exploration and having fun and just like, hey, here's our sandbox. What can we build? Um, Really, that was it. And so, yeah, I feel very lucky, like I said, that I grew up in a place, a backwater or a side show or however you want to put it. And certainly there was some really creative Canadian filmmaking at that time, which helped to, it helped Howard Shore's, career and mine are both based on the fact that there were good directors in Canada. By the way, directors that other directors watched around the world. And so when you ask how I ended up with such a diverse portfolio of films, it really is because I worked with a director's director, Adam McGoyan. And he might not be that well known to the general public, but every director at that time and still knows his work. Just like David Cronenberg for Howard, same thing. And those films certainly broke through more than Adams did, but
But his
every
films
director.
are incredible and are staples of your career and have made a huge impact on, I think, films in general. But another director who's made a huge impact is this guy named Ang Lee, who directed this little film called The Life of Pi, which won you this award called an Oscar a few years back. Ang Lee, so how did that relationship start? Because we've heard of all these great director-composer relationships, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Obviously, with Ang, it did work. So what was it like meeting him for the first time, and how did you guys get on initially?
Like it seems like I've designed this incredible kind of career. It was all accident and ignorance. Let me. I I was working with Adam in Toronto. Mira Nair was making a film called Kama Sutra. She heard the music for Exotica, Adam's film, and went, "Oh, here's some guy mixing East and West." And I'd gone to South Asia, India, and Sri Lanka and recorded a bunch of stuff, mixed it in with all this other electronic stuff and other things for the score for Exotica. She said, "That's the kind of score I want for Kama Sutra." So I was working with her in New York, which is an easy 50-minute flight from Toronto. So I was kind of commuting back and forth, sitting in the Brill building where all those, post-production for a lot of films were. I was literally sitting in a room with the music editor and we were cutting some stuff for Kama Sutra, and Alex Steyermark walked by and he was Ang's music supervisor they were working down the hall. I mean, that's kind of how it worked. And he stuck and he went, what is this? Who are you? And that's literally how it happened. So then I met with them, and that the first film that I worked with Ang was The Ice Storm, a film where I used gamelan and Native American flute, as well as a small string orchestra and
And then
some
there's, I think, Ride with the Devil, I believe.
Ride with the Devil, and yeah, and then the Hulk, which we did not complete together. Speaking of being fired, um, yeah, they're look. It's a that's a whole discussion on in itself. The a big film with a great deal of money attached to it, and there's there's a lot of the whole, corporation is kind of riding on the success or failure of this film. There's a lot of fear and nervousness, and I think if you go a little too outside the lines on a project like that, and I think early on, that was 2001 or two or somewhere back then, certainly it was just too crazy for them, for the studio. It wasn't Aang's decision so much, but I know look, you could ask him how he feels about it, but look, we became friends. We were still friends after. It was, something that happens. And then, yeah, the next film we worked on was Life of Pi, I think. Did we work on something before that? I can't remember. But in any case, I mean, we were friends. He would come visit me. He like saw my kids when they were born and things like that. So we were always close. And yeah, and when he finally, landed Life of Pi and decided, and it had gone from a few different filmmakers, and I knew the book because it was a Canadian book and it was something I'd read. Of course, I'm interested in South Asia. I read it as soon as it came out, and I'd kind of been watching to see where the film rights were going, and then I saw it went to Aang, and then I got the phone call from him. Well, this is one you were born to do, and
Mm-hmm. You certainly were, and Aang was certainly born to make the film. But it's a notoriously difficult thing to adapt. So many people were talking for years about how hard it would be, yet you guys did it with class, and I mean, it's a beautiful film. But you're sitting in the audience, you've put your heart into this music, you're surrounded by fellow musicians, composers, actresses, actors, directors, and they call your name. I want to ask, just from a very grounded level, what's going through your head when you're walking up to the stage? Because I'm sure that there were quite a few things, but what was that night like for you as a person who had been working for so long and finally got to that point?
I had been to a lot of award ceremonies before that and won lots of things and lost even many, many more. So I've been sitting in that chair waiting to hear your name, and you've got two competing strong emotions going on. I really hope they call my name. I really hope they don't call my name, because I'm going to have to remember this speech that I've been saying in my head for the last 3 hours, which is how long it was till I went up. So when you hear your name, you've got that burst of excitement, but then you also have that, oh God, now I have to do this walk. I hope I don't trip. Oh my God, look at all these, you look out and it's just ridiculous. It doesn't feel real. And then and there's a big clock at the back, that's all you can see as the person on the stage, is this big clock, like a 30-second clock or 45 seconds or whatever it was, just going down like this. And so you have to really focus and try and say the things that you wanted to say. But I think composers are pretty good at that, because we work with pressure and deadlines and time. And so, 45 seconds, yeah, we know what that is. And so, I think composers usually make pretty good speeches when they get on the stage. The Oscars are more just surreal than fun. The Golden Globes are a blast, but that's because there's champagne involved right from the time you sit down.
Right.
So that's a fun night, the Golden Globes.
Well, I want to jump back to a couple of films that are my personal favorites. One of my favorite films of all time, and I think it is horrendously underrated, and that is Girl Interrupted. I still watch that movie every single year, and I think it's extraordinary. And your musical score is so interesting and unique. You're using guitars with orchestra, and I hadn't really heard that kind of stuff up to that point. I wasn't really alive when the film came out, I don't think, but it was so effective for the story. Can you talk about what you remember working on that film with, I believe James Mangold was the one that directed it. What was that like for you?
It was a really fun project, and it's one I did while I was still living in Canada. And Yeah, we James is amazing. I love his filmmaking, and he's a really great guy to work with. And yeah, we wanted to dive into the spirit of the time with the kind of folk guitars, and it's something that I was around for that era, so I kind of know that sound, and it's a sound I love. And then also have kind of the emotionality and sweep of an orchestra. And then we also used a pretty odd ensemble called the Glass Orchestra, also a Toronto group that and classic Toronto ensemble, because you could only do it with government support, I'm guessing, is have a orchestra where every instrument is made of glass. And it was 4 or 5 guys, but it would be this beautiful setup of glass, like things you can hit, things you can bow, things you can blow, all made of glass. And just an incredible sound. And I'd seen them in concert. I knew the guys. They were same guys who played gamelan, some of them. And I just thought, oh, Girl Interrupted, that's the perfect sound for, you know, it just made me think of the film that they're all being observed through glass, through these little, panes of glass into their cells, and then just the brittleness and the kind of fragility and also the danger of glass. So it just felt like the right sound to me, and so that's another sound that's in that movie.
Yeah, and it was just a blend of tragedy but also unification because there's that beautiful ending where we know Winona Ryder's character is giving the speech about how they're all so different but they really come together, and despite the things that makes them different, she still loved them as people and understood them, and which I think is what's so great about that movie. Another great film. I'm a big fan of the book In Cold Blood. I think it's brilliantly written by Truman Capote. And the films, Philip Seymour Hoffman's performance is up there with the great performances. I want to ask you, what was it like working on Capote? Because that film, I think, is incredibly well done, and it has this very cold, restrictive, isolated feeling, and the music is fairly minimal compared to other stuff you've done. So, what was your approach to scoring that kind of undertone, which was very dark and mysterious?
Yeah, Bennett Miller is just, I think, one of the great filmmakers of our time. Moneyball, another film that I worked on. Um, I'm really sad and disturbed that he doesn't seem to make films anymore. It's a loss for everybody. But um, the Capote, I remember they sent over. I knew the producer was the same producer as Monsoon Wedding, and she sent over just like a 1 minute teaser or something, and I just saw the shot of the landscape. Went, oh my god, I love this film already. I love whoever's making this these images with that kind of spareness and just economy. It's and what's amazing, and Bennett is just such a brilliant kind of you know intellect, and his um, his whole kind of concept was, we want this film to be the same aesthetic as In Cold Blood, this the elegant, spare kind of use of words and phrases. Everything is just so economical, so stripped down. There's almost a black and white quality to it, and so we wanted the music to reflect that and to be as spare, and also not to use any instruments that would be out of place in that era. We tried that. We played with a lot of things, as we always do, and it just was like, like
So when you're working with performances like that just come off the screen, and I'm sure that when you were watching it, even without the score, as just the dailies were coming in and you were watching cuts, his performance stuck out to you. But what is it like deciding where music's going to go? The process of spotting a movie like that with very central performances. How do you know when to not overscore, but when there needs to be something there in order to get a certain feeling? How do you make that decision?
yeah, that's one where a minimalist score and minimalist spotting was really the way to go, because there's so much coming at you from the performance. The music really, in a way, is just like creating a vibration in the air, like just creating a mist or some kind of ambience, just um, something that just changes the space a little bit. But you have to be so careful not to impose any emotion that because a film like that is so delicate and sensitive that anything too much is going to really just break the scene. So it's something, it was very difficult to do. It was one of the more challenging scores, certainly up to that point in my career, for me to do. And Bennett, you know, knew in his mind what it needed to be as far as the minimal quality of it and how it needed to support, like I said, the scene as opposed to support the action and the drama. So we had to be really careful with it. But once I locked into that kind of concept, then we were off.
Totally different film, much more lighthearted. 500 Days of Summer. Joseph
Yeah.
Gordon-Levitt. Can you talk about the process of working on that film?
Another, and I've really been lucky, and it's such a cliche to say, but I have worked on some really great
You
films
really
with
have.
some I have, and really smart directors and they're all different. But Mark, again, just like a real, such a beautiful film, and it's funny and tragic and relatable on so many levels. And yeah, so finding a score that had a bit of that whimsy, that certainly didn't play up the melodrama. We wanted to really hold back from that, because yeah, it's fine for the audience to feel that emotion, but you have to let them find that on their own. So we really went more for the whimsy, for delicate emotion, very much in a little bit of playing with kind of 50s kind of tropes, and a little bit of a throwback score, just in kind of its flavor and and the lingering effect of it.
Yeah, it's such a stylistic movie that has such a radiating feel. Like you could tell the director had every single thing planned out, and it's excellently done. I want to ask you, based on all these composer relationships, and you've had all these experiences throughout your career, um, I'm interested. What are the things that are the biggest elements that you like in that director-composer relationships? How do you want them? How do you like collaborating with directors? Do you like them to stick mainly to story? Do you like them to get involved with musical elements? Do you like them to be in the writer's room, out of the writer's room? How does the process go? Or does it just vary based on every project?
Um, I've done it in every possible way at this point. Ice Storm, I remember we got a studio in New York and a keyboard, and Aang literally sat beside me while I was writing the one scene that I was having trouble nailing. Which, by the way, what's really funny is that particular piece of music, which is piano and clarinet. It's the scene where it's a really moving scene where Kevin Kline is carrying home his daughter. And it's a really, in fact, I like feel emotional even thinking about it. And finally, I got something that he liked. But what's funny is that he ended up temping that into, was it? It was, I think it was Ride with the Devil,
Hmm.
and
Yeah, that was the one that
it
you did
was this
after that. Yeah, with Aang.
It was, yeah. He tamped that into it, and then I couldn't replace it. Like I kept, it was like this piece that I had to bleed to to make, and then he ended up falling in love with it. So it's funny how things go. But I've had those experiences, same as Bennett Miller, like writing a piece, like him in the next room, and he'd come in. No, that's not it. Come on, go out. No, that's not it. Um, so, but yeah, look, the thing that I think the way I like working with a director is to really do a lot of talking to understand, why did you make the film? What is it about this story that attracted you to it? What is it that you're trying to say? What is it you want to leave with people? How do you want people to feel? Give me the backstory of these characters. Where were they before they walk on screen, and things like that. So I really understand the story, really in a very profound way, and also I understand how they see the story in a profound way. And that's when we, only after that do we make our decision. Okay, this is the kind of score that it should be. These are the instruments. This is where we need themes. These are what the themes need to accomplish. So it's something that, look, everyone's different. I read about people who write scores like at the script stage, which, I've never done once. I
So
can't.
do you like to look at visuals?
I
Okay.
have to. I don't understand the film otherwise.
Yeah.
A script is just, it's a different art form. It's like the novel. Okay, there's the novel, and then there's the script, and then the thing that we're actually working with, which is the film. So yeah, you need to feel the temperature of it, the pace of it, the cutting rhythm, all those things. Like that's what informs, well, what it needs, what it calls out for the score that it needs.
Netflix is a platform that has sort of made an introduction over the past 10 years and has pretty much changed the way that not only we see, video on demand on our computers and TVs and all that type of stuff, but it's changed the way other platforms work, like HBO and Hulu, all making original series, and you've got every single company on earth making original series at this point. But you worked on a really great series, Alias Grace, which has a great performance by Sarah Gadon, and it really takes you into the world of 19th century England, and it's very immersive in that way. Can you talk about the process of working with Mary and Netflix, and how working with Netflix differs from working with the film studio?
Yeah, with that project, I really had no. I mean, it was one of the purest kind of working relationships. It was just working with Mary, working with Sarah Pauly, who's somebody that I've known since she was a little kid in
And
Toronto,
she was
because
she was the writer, right?
she was the writer,
Okay.
and she was Road to Avonlea. She was Anne of Green Gables in this show called Road to Avonlea, which I actually wrote some episodes for. Then we did another thing together, and then in The Sweet Hereafter, she and I wrote the songs together when she was like 19 or 20 or something. So I've known her for decades, and so it was a great. I had no kind of and Netflix is kind of famous for that they're very artist friendly, in that they let you, once they sign the dotted line, then they just, okay, go make your film. And that's certainly how that experience was with me. I just worked with them, and that I absolutely love that series. It's one of my
Yeah,
favorites.
it's
and
great. Yeah, it's
and
amazing.
I'm glad you mentioned it, because yeah, a lot of people don't know it, but it's a score I'm really proud of. I did with my brother Jeff. But the funny thing is, in fact, I framed the poster over here.
Oh,
Um,
right. Yeah. Turn the prison
so
cell.
that's right. But
Now, for that series, I was watching the series and I was thinking to myself, this seems like it would be a difficult show to score because the series is essentially from the perspective of Grace's character, and she's a very complicated character. Sometimes you don't know whether to be with her, be with against her. The opening scene is just her staring into the camera, and you don't know what's going on in her head, but the music is there helping to tell the story. So in a story like that is so character centric and it has this perspective, how do you as a composer dive into that character's perspective and create that world?
that was another one where it was really an atmospheric score. The odd thing is that when I was a university undergraduate, I was a docent dressed up in those clothes in the house in this house in Toronto, this 1830s house where William Lyon Mackenzie, who's actually mentioned in the story. So I felt like I was back in that place in that time. It's kind of a place and time I knew really well because I had to work the printing press. That was my job,
Wow.
and like the old 1820s printing press, and
Yeah.
wear the clothes and everything. So I was like, oh yeah, I know this world. I'm ready. Um, so it was something to, again, it was a, a kind of atmospheric score that really just sets this mood and makes things a little off kind of all the time, and this feeling of something terrible has happened and something terrible is going to happen, without, again, beating you over the head with that, but just having that in the air, just this kind of constant tension and um, and just some dread, a soupçon of dread, and also we use the sounds kind of the the door, the what's it called, the cellar door, the ones
Oh,
that come up the floor, but
yeah.
we used the sound of that slamming shut, and so that actually was one of the sounds we used. um, so, and then period instruments and an old piano and things like that. But yeah, it's a score that um, I'm really proud of that one.
Now, I could sit here for a billion years and ask you about all of your films because I'm a big fan of independent film, all those little films that come out that nobody sees that I sort of love, and you've worked on a lot of those kinds of films. But I think another film over the past 3 years that made an impact, I think, on me when I first heard the score and I was like, that's really different, is On the Basis of Sex. And obviously, we recently lost Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and that was a great film that paid respect to her life and career, and I'd recommend it for anyone that hasn't seen it. But your approach to that's really interesting, the use of the snare drum and all that kind of stuff. So how did you determine how you were going to approach that character? Because she has such a legacy. She's a powerhouse woman. She's got all this. So how did you dive into her mind for that score?
There was something about, and this just happens when you're working on a film and you watch it over and over again, and then suddenly a sound will just kind of jump into you. You'll just be kind of daydreaming, and then suddenly it'll just come to you. And that's a case where, the opening where we have her kind of walking into class for the very first time. And yeah, I just got to thinking about like a marching band, and the Princeton marching band and the Princeton song, and just that kind of collegial march. There's something about it with this confidence and drive, and the fact that it was such a male world and such a male kind of music in a way, and for it to kind of become her anthem. That was the concept there, to sort of turn that on its head a bit and make that very male world, that very male anthem, to make it hers.
Yeah, it feels like it was just totally with what was happening in the story because she's in this world of men, and what she's doing is essentially is defying that. She's being the outcast in the best possible way, and I feel like the music literally draws that contrast so beautifully. One question I want to ask you that I don't think it's asked enough of composers. I always want to ask people like you who have done so much over their career, what's the biggest struggle you've run into? Because I feel like every artist has struggles. What's the biggest thing that you've run into every now and again that you've overcome that
Well, the biggest struggle is with myself. There's no question and it's, look, we're here alone in a room. You're presumably alone in your room. That's where we do our work. And it takes this really delicate combination of confidence, arrogance, humility, um, and it's something that you have to really be in just the right place, because if you don't have the confidence in yourself, in the belief in yourself, you can't write a note. But you also have to have the humility and the openness to say, no, that's not working. This isn't right. This person's suggestion is actually really helpful. So I think it's a solitary battle. you're there by yourself, which is why I often like writing with other people, like my brother, because that does really mitigate. Ultimately, you still are alone in your room, but at least you have someone to make jokes with about how painful it is. Or after a terrible meeting, you can make fun of the people that were in the meeting together. But yeah, it's a really solitary life, and that can be very rewarding, but it can be really challenging. And I think there's definitely been moments where yeah, you're overwhelmed by that, and you have to fight through it. And um, yeah, there's been some definitely some dark moments that way. And I know that any writer, anybody who's alone trying to create something goes through that. And I'm jealous of people that have kind of endless well of self-confidence and energy. But yeah, sometimes I need to really dig deep to find that. But yeah, the times where there's been those crisis moments where you really feel I can't do this, I really can't do this. And when you fight through that, and when you do get through it, it's yeah, you're a better person because of it. And Life of Pi is a great example of a film where uh, that was very difficult. And again, it was kind of what we were talking about before. There's no film like it, so we couldn't say, "Oh, you
There was
just
no
need to."
reference book. Yeah.
There's no reference, yeah.
Yeah.
And so and by the way, for the film too, as they were editing it, we were all sitting back going, "This film doesn't work. This music doesn't work." And by the way, the film doesn't work either. And it was that way for months. And we had to just kind of find it together. And it was, yeah, there were some dark moments for all of us, but the, when you fight through it and don't give up, the reward is, yeah. And it's not the rewards from out there, it really is the reward from inside and within the group, within the people that did that together. I mean, when Aang and I hug, like, we know what we went through together on that. And that's, yeah, that's what's there.
Well, I feel like that's part of the beautiful magic of cinema is when I, I always think of some woman who's gotten home from work that's going to take her husband out to the movies and they go to sit down and watch The Life of Pi or whatever other movie you've worked on. And all of that hard work, all of that, the pain, sweat, tear, and toil, and arguments, and sitting looking at the blank canvas has transferred into that one experience for that couple watching that film. So it must just be incredible once you're done to sit back and just watch everything dubbed. How is that for you, just watching the final product?
Yeah, it's magic, and it truly is. Look, I don't know how you write music after all these years. I don't know how you make a film either. And when they're finished and done, and they are an entity unto themselves that speaks to people, it's the most magical, mysterious thing. And that's the thing that we keep chasing. That's why we go through what we go through, because yeah, the result can be so powerful, and it's a little out of everyone's control. You really can't set out to make Godfather 1. Well, we all do, but how it gets there is pretty much a mystery to everybody. And that's what's fun about it, and that's what's rewarding about it. And yeah, to move people and to have people experience another way of thinking, another way of living through our art is really, yeah, it's magic.
All of your experience so far in your life, and you haven't written your last score yet, but all of those soundtracks, all those experiences, all those relationships and collaborations, and all of the hard work. What is the thing that you've learned along the way that you sort of carry with you? What is the battle scar? What is the thing that you constantly remind yourself of that you've learned from all of your experiences?
I think kind of what we were just saying, the power of film, and what an amazing effect it has. It's the art form of our time. It's like, it's been the symphony, it's been the opera, it's been, you know, all these things through history. But right now, unquestionably, it's film. And um, there's just something that is so rich about being part of that I'm very grateful for being part of it, and accidentally falling into it, and accidentally being able to contribute. What I've learned along the way are lots of humility, and yeah, and also faith in myself is something else that I've learned, hard won through um, through a lot of years of doing this over and over again. But even so, when I go upstairs, close the door in my room, which is completely black, like ceiling, floor, walls, um, I still don't know what I'm doing. But I do at this point have the faith that there's a way to get where we need to go, because I've felt that way on every of the 100 projects I've done. I've always felt, I don't know how to do this. Like, where do I start? I don't know. But yeah, I have faith that I have I have procedures of setting things up so that I will be able to succeed.
From the perspective of somebody that has been inspired and moved by your music for years, I just want to say thank you. And I know that there's a lot of people like me, but on behalf of all of us, thank you for your work. Thank you for what you do. And I wish you all the very best. And thank you. I appreciate it.
And I'm excited to hear what you guys will come up with next. That's something that I look forward to.
There we go. Thank you so much. Well, you have a great day, and I hope to do another one of these someday. There's so much more to talk about.